All right, well, good morning, everyone. If you could just try to find your seats. Good morning, I'm Sean Nelson. I'm the Chief Assistant District Attorney here in the County of Orange. It's a pleasure to be with you this morning. Remembering those we've lost, honoring those who've survived, and continuing to fight for victims' rights and justice. Welcome to the Orange County Victims' Rights Rally. Please stand as Pastor Sam Shin from the Korean Pastors Association leads us in prayer and a moment of silence. Pastor Shin.
Heavenly Father, you stated, who worry and burden, come to me, then I will give the peace. Heavenly Father, we thank you for allowing us to gather together this morning. It is still difficult in our life, which due to COVID-19, but we thank you for bringing us together today to Victim Right Week ceremonies. Lord God, you are the author, sustainer of our lives. We know the anguish of the sorrowful. You are the adapted to the prayer of the broken hearts. Hear your people who cry out to you in their needs. Strengthen their hope in your lasting goodness. Lord God, please pour out your spirit like a mighty flood into the heart of all people. We pray today for those who have hurt or died because of violence or terrorism. Draw them to yourself. Let your face shine upon them. May they be greeted with choir of the angels and experience your internal peace and joy. Be near to all those who have been tortured by violence, those who have hurt, lost their loved ones, or lost their sense of security. Before them, steady comfort and self-rest in peace. Soften their hearts, steady of the minds of those who were violent to others. May hate be replaced with your loves, violence with the peace, and darkness with your light. Fill them with your goodness and loves, that they may cease their evil works, and that our cities and our country and our land to be free from the scourge of the violence and the crimes. We pray also for the grace to pledge ourselves of all violence in our own thoughts and actions, in our family life, in our relationship, in a relationship with others. Finally, our God, I pray you will be with all the orders today who come together so we can finish with your grace, your love. Well, thank you for your moment in time, Lord God. In Jesus' name we all pray, amen.
Thank you, Pastor Shin. Please remain standing. At this time, we'd like to invite forward Chief Paul Walters of the Orange County District Attorney's Bureau of Investigation, as he'll call to attention the Orange County District Attorney's Honor Guard. Orange County Undersheriff Jeff Halleck will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, and immediately after, the Three Men Alive tenors of the Orange County Gay Men's Chorus will sing the national anthem after the presentation of the colors. Chief Walters.
Honor Guard, present colors.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, everybody, for being here, those that are here in person and those joining us virtually. Today truly is an opportunity for all of us to renew our commitment to aiding crime victims. And in remembrance of those law enforcement officers who have paid the ultimate sacrifice and for crime victims, will you please join me in saluting the flag of the greatest nation in the world. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight, o'er the ramparts we watched, were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave for the land of the free and the home of the brave.
Thank you. Please be seated. I'd like to introduce you now to some other guests who have joined me on stage. To my left, Steve and Raquel Hare, parents of murder victim Sam Hare. Jonathan Hatami, the Deputy District Attorney with the Orange County District Attorney's Office. Mr. Hatami prosecuted the torture and murder of 8-year-old Gabriel Fernandez. We have joining us Patricia Winskunis, the founder and CEO of Crime Survivors, Inc. Obviously, our District Attorney, Todd Spitzer, the Undersheriff, Jeff Halleck, and former District Attorney, Steve Cooley. Before we begin, I want to thank our co-sponsors, benefactors, and volunteers who've helped underwrite and support this event. First and foremost, I'd like to thank the Orange County Sheriff's Department and the Santa Ana Police for their time and support in coordinating this event. I'd also like to thank the Association of Orange County Deputy District Attorneys, Civic Action Committee, the Orange County District Attorney Investigators, the Orange County Board of Supervisors, 3 of whom are present today, the Orange County CEO's Office, and Waymakers, our victim outreach group for their generous donations. Thank you. I'd now like to acknowledge the elected officials and dignitaries who have joined us in empowering victims and continuing the fight for victims' rights this morning. Of our elected officials, as you know, our host, Orange County District Attorney Todd Spitzer. From our Board of Supervisors, Vice Chair Doug Chafee, Supervisor Don Wagner, and our newest supervisor, Katrina Foley. Welcome. Mayors that are with us today from around Orange County: Huntington Beach Mayor Kim Carr, Laguna Hills Mayor Erica Pizzold, Westminster Mayor Tree Taw, and San Clemente Mayor Kathy Ward. Council members who have joined us today: Art Brown from Buena Park, Aliso Viejo Councilmember Dave Harrington, San Clemente Councilman Steve Knobloch, Buena Park Mayor Pro Tem Sonny Park, Laguna Niguel Councilmember Sandy Raines, La Habra Councilmember Tim Shaw, and Newport Beach Councilwoman Diane Dixon. Representing Luke Correa's office, Sean Sargent. Representing Michelle Steele's office, Austin Mejia. Assemblyman Steve Choi's office, Carrie O'Malley and Jose Martinez. And representing Assemblywoman Lori Davies' office, Jennifer Ortiz Alazieri. Welcome. From our police departments: Orange County Sheriff's Department Assistant Sheriff Jeff Halleck, Brea Police Department Chief Adam Hawley, Cal State Fullerton Police Chief Lieutenant Bob Mullaney, Laguna Beach Police Department Captain Johnson, Seal Beach Police Department Captain Mike Ezraj, Tustin Police Department Deputy Chief Robert Wright, Captain Wayne Byerly of Los Alamitos Police Department, Lieutenant Scott Poyer from CHP, and from Fountain Valley Police Chief Matt Shepard. Thank you all, and thank you for being with us this morning. We have many victims groups that are represented here today, and the victims they serve. These groups play a vital role in supporting victims and advocating for reform. We're honored to have so many of our past keynote speakers here with us today. They've shared their stories, opened their hearts to us, and we're so honored to have their continued support. Thank you. I'd now like to invite Orange County Board of Supervisors Vice Chair Doug Chafee with his new knee. Be very careful, sir. We have stairs. Perhaps of the security detail, we have a rail. Supervisor Chafee, it's a pleasure to have you with us, and thank you for. Supervisor Wagner and Supervisor Foley, would you please like to come forward and join your colleague on stage? We're going to present the resolution. Thank you for joining us.
Yes, thank you so much. But first, I must send you greetings from our chairman, Andrew Doe, who's unable to be with us today. As a former prosecutor and district attorney, he is deeply aware of the pain victims of crime feel and suffer. So greetings from him. And I have on stage with me, joining me today, Supervisor Don Wagner and the newest supervisor, Katrina Foley. It's my pleasure to present, all of us together, a resolution of the Board of Supervisors. And it is to commemorate the week of April 18 to 24 as National Crime Victims' Rights Week. Since 1981, National Crime Victims Week is a time to renew our commitment to serving all victims of crime, to acknowledge the achievements in victim services and allied professions, to honor those who've gone above and beyond in their service to others, to remember crime victims and survivors. The theme for 2021 is support victims, build trust, engage communities, emphasize the importance of leveraging community support of victims of crime. And our responsibility is to do justice and seek justice and ensure that crime victims' rights are protected. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Orange County Board of Supervisors do hereby recognize April 18 to 24 as Crime Victims' Rights Week, and on this occasion do encourage residents to support crime victims, build trust, and engage communities. Let's thank all of you here today to honor victims of crime. No, it's easy to address the physical aspects, but so hard to address the emotional aspects. The potpourri of emotions you feel when you're a victim of crime, the sense of loss, the anger, the deep hurt. And that's what we're trying to help you with, get over that and bring you back into society. That is so hard. So thank all of you for your support. We're doing everything we can to encourage helping victims of crime relieve the suffering that they are enduring and that you don't see because it's deep within. So thank all of you for coming here today.
Good morning, and thank you all for coming here. I'll keep it brief. I just want to send my thoughts out and my love to those who support those who are the most vulnerable. I want to thank our crime victim advocates, our social workers, our DAs, and our public safety officers who work so hard to help those who are just in so much pain and feel like there is no hope and there is no path that will get beyond the grief. So thank you so much for caring, and to those who have suffered so much and who have lost their loved ones, our hearts go out to you. Thank you.
Briefly, we know all about the rights of the accused, and they are constitutional and they are important. They are the rights against self-incrimination, the right, of course, to be tried in front of an impartial jury, to not bear witness against themselves, to be safe from unreasonable searches and seizures. We know all of those rights. Too often, the other side of the equation is lost, and that is the family. That is the victim, the folks who wake up every day for the rest of their lives, living and reliving what has been done to them. It is possible to respect the rights of the accused. We owe them that. That is a fundamental duty. It is equally fundamental for a just society to never forget the victims. To the DA's office, to the Sheriff's Department, and more importantly, to everyone that is here in our community, remembering and respecting those rights, a very sincere and heartfelt thank you from me and from all of my colleagues, I'm sure, on the Board of Supervisors. Thank you, DA Spitzer.
Vice Chairman Chavey, just before you go, I want you to acknowledge all the members of the Board of Supervisors, because last Tuesday, they unanimously voted that this location, which we are standing on today, is now the home of the Crime Victims Monument for the entire County of Orange. Unanimous vote by these good people. Please, please acknowledge their support of crime victims.
Thank you again to our Board of Supervisors. And please forgive me, on your far right of our stage, the parents of Jeffrey Vargo, a young boy who was murdered. Mr. and Mrs. Vargo, welcome. Thank you for being with us today. It's my privilege at this time to introduce our District Attorney, Todd Spitzer. Todd's dedicated his life to keeping families safe, was inspired to dedicate his career to public service, both as a high school teacher in East Los Angeles, as a reserve police officer for LAPD for 10 years, a Brea school board member, county supervisor, former state assembly member, and now as your elected district attorney. He was a statewide co-chair for Marcy's Law, the Victims' Bill of Rights, and he authors Megan's Law for California. He's a true champion for public safety and for victims. Please join me in welcoming our district attorney, Todd Spitzer.
Well, good morning. I cannot tell you how joyful it is to see real people in our presence. And I cannot, again, thank the Board of Supervisors for their leadership in leading us out of this pandemic, getting the vaccinations in line, and making us safe again. So I am very, very appreciative. I want to acknowledge the 900 employees of this agency in front of the victims and in front of the world. We have the 3rd largest district attorney's office in California and the 6th in the nation. We have 300 lawyers and 150 investigators and support staff, and they get up every single day to defend and fight for crime victims. And now we're in the criminal justice quad, the sheriff's department and the district attorney's office, and this will be the crime victims monument. And every day when we walk into work, everybody who gets up to fight for the rights of victims will be reminded constantly why we're here, why we fight, and what we do. On my lapel, I have a couple buttons. I could have 10,000 buttons of victims, but I want to share with you who these people are because they're very, very important to me and have been in my life. Lisa Frost was killed in a plane that crashed into the Twin Towers in New York City on 9/11. She was born and raised in Rancho Santa Margarita. She's one of our people, one of our citizens, and her family has suffered greatly, and they've become great champions for crime victims through their loss. I have little Samantha Runyon on my lapel. She was kidnapped and abducted and sexually assaulted and murdered. And yet her mother went on to form a very important organization to fight for crime victims, and she has used that suffering to be a productive person, never forgetting what happened to her daughter. And then I have Marcy Nicholas on my lapel, who when she graduated from UC Santa Barbara and broke up with her boyfriend, he didn't want to break up, and so he shot her in the head with a shotgun, killing her. And because of her brother and his good fortune, we were able to pass Marcy's Law, the first in the entire nation. And now there are really good people who are trying to do it for the rest of the country so we can have this added to the United States Constitution. Here's a picture of Steve Ambrose, Orange City Councilman. This is in my office. I look at it every day. Steve was an Orange City Councilman. He was my chief of staff when I was a county supervisor, and he was hit head on by a woman who was under the influence of methamphetamine and alcohol, and he died and left a wife and a daughter. These prosecutors and the people that work in the DA's office, we deal with this and see this every day. And we care about you, and we care about our community, and we want to make sure this doesn't happen to anybody else, but it does. 4 people were murdered in Orange 10 days ago. Mr. Frost was rear-ended in Costa Mesa, and the person tried to leave, and when they did, they ran over him, and now that case is going to be pending in our system. It seems to never, ever, ever stop. And what I'm going to tell you today is every one of the 58 district attorneys in the state of California needs to be united behind crime victims. All 58. There's no compromising. Crime victims' rights are recognized in Article 10, Section 28 of the California Constitution. This is not going to become a state that recognizes criminal rights. Supervisor Wagner talked about it. Those rights are already enumerated throughout our United States Constitution, and every prosecutor here understands that they have a right to enforce the defendant's rights as well. We will not get convictions at any cost. We will always do justice, and we will always stand for the right thing in this county. Every single sworn prosecutor, police officer, and staff member knows that. We don't play games. We don't suffer against the system. We do what's right. We hold our head up high. We wear the white hat, and we fight for people. We fight and we fight and we fight. And no one is going to try to put us in our place. No one is going to jeopardize our profession. No one is going to say that crime victims don't matter. No one is going to say that police officers don't matter. No one is going to say that our community doesn't matter. We get up every day to fight to keep Orange County safe, and yet we don't have borders. Don't think that our county with its contiguous border somehow is an isolated island. What happens here affects San Diego and Riverside and San Bernardino and even Los Angeles County. But what Los Angeles County does to us affects us too. So let that sink in today. When you hear these talks today, understand something. We are joined together by our humanity, by our empathy, by our conviction, by our love for each other and for our brethren and our sisters. And we will not allow any forces of evil to overtake our community, whether it comes from people who try to hurt us or if it comes from individuals who are also in the system. We will not allow it. So as I look at it, all of you today, with all your beautiful different colors and how we look, I don't care who you love. I don't care who you want to marry. I don't care who you associate with or what you look like. We will always respect everybody who lives here, who wants to be here, who cares about our country, who cares about our county, and cares about our safety. God bless the Gay Men's Chorus today, and the pastors who are here, and our diversity. That's what gives us strength. It's our diversity that gives us strength. That's what brings us together. Today is my 25th wedding anniversary, and my wife can't be here. She's a little bit under the weather. But I just have to tell you something. She and I have been doing this for a long time now, almost 30 years. And it's hard to get up every day and continue to fight. It's rough. And you all know that. But I'm going to tell you something. It's in our DNA. It's the way we were created. There's nothing I can do about it to change it. I don't want to change it. I won't change it. And everybody up here doesn't want it to change. We want safe communities, and we're going to make sure we have them. And a person who fought for years to bring safe communities is here with us today. He was the district attorney of Los Angeles County for 12 years. He was a career prosecutor. He earned the right to be district attorney. He knew how to be a district attorney, and he kept Los Angeles County safe. And he's here to share his thoughts with all of us. Would you please welcome Steve Cooley?
Who is going to stand and fight for those who can no longer stand and fight for themselves? That's kind of the question that permeates today at this event and at others like it, at one tomorrow in Los Angeles County. The answer to the question is actually quite simple. Those who stand and fight for those who can no longer stand and fight for themselves are the elected district attorneys and their deputies who took an oath and are following it. There are very few exceptions to that following the oath, but unfortunately there are exceptions to that. You're blessed in this county with an elected district attorney and a great DA's office that is totally committed to upholding the law, not ignoring the law. Who else stands and fights? Law enforcement officers, dedicated, committed, skilled, smart, with an attitude of never giving up until they solve the crime. Victims advocacy groups, victims' rights groups, they stand and fight. Some of them are here today. Others are with us in spirit. They have been created oftentimes by being victimized or having a loved one victimized. And that gave them the motivation, the spirit to form a group, to stand up and fight for others who have been victimized. And last and certainly not least of those who stand and fight are what is referred to as victims next of kin. That's the parents, the grandparents, the siblings, the children, the dear friends, the spouses of those who can no longer stand and fight for themselves. That is an important element because they have an important story to tell the public at large. How important it is to have a prosecutor that obeys his oath, law enforcement officers that do their duty, victims' rights groups that are out there fighting for them. There are, unfortunately, victims next of kin here today, just as there are all over the state of California and our country. So we all have to commit ourselves, whatever way we can, to stand and fight for those who can no longer stand and fight for themselves.
Thank you, Mr. Cooley. Just an opportunity to announce additional electeds joining us this morning. Orange County Clerk Recorder Hugh Wynn, Laguna Niguel Mayor Fred Miniger, Yorba Linda Mayor Peggy Huang, Irvine Vice Mayor Tammy Kim, Santa Ana Council members David Penaloza and Phil Becerra, and representing Congresswoman Young Kim's office, Lynette Choi. Thank you all for being with us. Nina Salarno, the President and Executive Director of Crime Victims United, was scheduled to be with us today. Her oldest sister, Katina, was stalked and murdered execution style by her boyfriend in 1979. Nina and her mother, Harriet, have been tireless advocates for victims' rights up and down the state of California ever since. Unfortunately, Nina had an unexpected death in her family, and she will not be able to join us today, but our thoughts and prayers are with her. At this time, we're going to play a video announcement by our elected Sheriff, Don Barnes. Don is a big supporter of victims and victims' rights, and Don's daughter was involved in a wedding this weekend, as you can all understand. Otherwise, he'd be with us. Let's go ahead and play the video.
This is National Crime Victims' Rights Week, a time designated for promoting the rights and services provided to victims of crime and their families. Over the next few days, memorials and events will take place across the nation in honor of crime victims. While these events are important, they are meaningless unless we also have a criminal justice system that values and protects victims. Recent changes in state law and new policies enacted in some local jurisdictions have removed consequences for violating the law and empowered the guilty over the innocent. These changes create an imbalanced justice system that overlooks the voice of the victim and perpetuates crime. Many of these changes have been done in the name of criminal justice reform. I am fully supportive of reform efforts that reduce recidivism and help former offenders become productive members of society. We have initiated a number of reforms in our jail to help inmates be successful upon the completion of their sentences. Unfortunately, these efforts are stymied when our laws incentivize bad behavior. True criminal justice reform will support innovative programs that put people on the right path rather than further propel them into criminality. I encourage all of those watching this message to take the opportunity to contact your elected representatives and encourage them to support proposals that restore balance to our criminal justice system. You can be the voice for the crime victims who are no longer able to speak for themselves. Thank you for supporting our efforts to keep Orange County safe.
All right, thank you, Sheriff Barnes. It's now my honor to introduce Patricia Winskunis, the founder and CEO of Crime Survivors. Over the last 18 years, Patricia's channeled her experience of victimization into one of survival. Crime Survivors has been fighting to have the voices of victims heard. As the statewide co-chair of Marsy's Law, Patricia Winskunis was one of the first proponents of California's Victims' Bill of Rights. For nearly 2 decades, Crime Survivors has stood next to the survivors of crime and their loved ones and provided them love, support, and hope on their own road to becoming a survivor. Patricia?
Thank you. Thank you to District Attorney Todd Spitzer and his entire staff and team here at the District Attorney's Office to represent National Crime Victims' Rights Week and to show continuous support for all victims of violent crime here in Orange County and throughout the state of California and throughout the nation as well. I'd like to especially thank law enforcement for truly going above and beyond the call of duty for victims of crime here in Orange County and throughout Southern California. I'd also like to recognize and acknowledge all of the other organizations that are here today that really support their loved ones and support future victims of crime, as well as service providers, essential workers, and all that are attending here today to support victims, to build trust, and to engage in our communities. My mission in life is not merely to survive, but to thrive, and to do so with some passion, some compassion, some humor, and some style. And that is from Maya Angelou. My name is Patricia Winskunis. I'm the founder CEO of Crime Survivors, but I'm also so much more than that. I'm a mother, I'm a grandmother, I'm a community leader, I'm a woman, and I'm an individual that's trying to live my life after trauma. I was victimized, but I refuse to live as a victim. I'm a survivor and I'm a thriver, and like I said, I am so much more than that. Being victimized at a very young age, several times, and then not until I was 32, when I was still living a victim's life and not even realizing it. On April 4th of 2002, my personal trainer came into my house, drugged me, wrapped my face and head in saran wrap, beat me black and blue, screaming that when he was done killing me, he was going to kill my son. When I went over a 12-foot balcony, eventually to get to a neighbor's house, it was law enforcement for the first time in my life that treated me with respect and dignity and truly went above and beyond the call of duty to make sure that an arrest was made and that there was going to be a conviction in the case. However, he was charged with deliberate premeditated attempted murder, burglary in the first degree, assault with a deadly weapon, and criminal threats. And through our legal system, he served only approximately 120 days. Yes, 120 days, and I still don't understand that to this day, and I never will. However, I know that God gave me a gift. On April 4th, I promised God, with faith there is hope, with every next breath I will live for community above self. And I like to think that 19 years later, I am keeping that promise, and that's why I'm here today. After going through what I went through, I realized, even with today's National Crime Victims' Rights Week, with the theme being support victims, build trust, and engaging in community, to me, it represents such an importance as it did 19 years ago. We need it now more than ever before because the scales of justice are imbalanced. They're not here supporting victims of crime. Even though we have amazing organizations, amazing individuals doing everything they possibly can for victims and survivors and family members, we're still losing the battle. After laws like AB 109 and Prop 47 and Prop 57 and everything that's going on with district attorneys and everything throughout the state and nation, it is not supporting victims. And we need you today to join our efforts to be able to support victims, to be a voice for the voiceless, to stand tall and help one another, because victims have a right to justice. They have a right to resources. They have a right to be heard, and they have a right to break the cycles of victimization so that they too can survive and they can thrive. And that is what we're asking you today to be here today to support National Crime Victims' Rights Week, but to support our District Attorney Todd Spitzer and his team, to support the sheriff and his team, and to support victims and survivors and our community, and to come together, one and for all. It's worse than ever. We call it the criminal justice system, but where do the victims fall into that? Please remember that and really think about that as well. We are very excited to be able to have the Crime Victims Monument here between the District Attorney's Office, the Sheriff's Department. What better place for it to take place? Because that way we bring together the District Attorney, the Sheriff, law enforcement, our community, our counties, and we have a place for victims and survivors to come to reflect, to heal, to have hope, to have resources, and to have empowerment and peace and love as well. I leave you with the following. It is a poem called Power. It may not be a measure of physical strength or size. Instead, it is an inner strength and drive, a spirit of enjoyment that shows we are alive. You might not always see it, but it's always there down deep inside. It just might take some coaching or bring forth that strength and pride. Each of us can be powerful. We have to know it true to let free our power to do what we must do. Just a thought. You can make a difference. Today, I ask you to join in supporting victims of crime, to build trust, justice, and engaging in our communities. We are better together. Remember that with faith, there is hope. Thank you, and God bless.
Thank you, Patricia. It's now my honor to introduce Lita Mercado of Waymakers. Waymakers provides victim advocates to the victims in our cases, helping them to navigate the court process and ensuring the victims' voices are heard in the courtroom. Lita, welcome.
Thank you, Sean. I want to lower my voice and sound as booming as you, so let me see what I can do. Good morning, everyone. Thank you to everyone who is courageously participating in today's event. As Mr. Nelson said, my name is Lita Mercado, and I am the Director of Victim Assistance Programs for Waymakers. Waymakers is a nonprofit organization that aims to build safer communities by helping individuals make their way through crisis to a place of strength and stability. The Victim Assistance Programs is committed to ensuring that victims of crime and their families receive quality, comprehensive services, and the goals are to help alleviate the trauma and devastating effects of crimes on the lives of victims and their families. It is also to lessen the concern that may be caused by their participation in the criminal justice system. Often, in the pursuit of justice, victims had been neglected or even forgotten. However, here in Orange County, all the key stakeholders work in close collaboration to ensure that victims are upheld, and you're seeing just a part of that experience here today. Working with the Orange County District Attorney's Office, Superior Court, law enforcement agencies, social services, and other communities and individuals, Waymakers has provided victims and their families with services to mitigate trauma suffered as a result of crimes perpetrated against them. We have provided assistance to more than 50,000 victims and witnesses each year. And what a year has been. This year, we have all struggled through a global pandemic, a racial equity awakening, and even the testing of our very own democracy. Many of us have been moving through all of this over the layers of trauma already experienced through crime victimization. This, however, may be our most resilient moment. The entire world has had a glimpse of what it feels like to be trapped by fear and to have to push through. This shared struggle has brought empathy to the plight of survivorship. My hope is that we will leverage this moment and end all forms of violence in our communities. And to do this, we must continue to acknowledge that the roots of violence are dug deep in racism, sexism, and inequity in all its forms. We must advocate for respect, create spaces like this for healing, support one another, listen without judging, and demand accountability. This event is an acknowledgement that we are all knee-deep in these efforts. These are also all the ways that we can realize this year's National Crime Victims' Rights Week theme: to support victims, build trust, and engage communities. I hope that today's event helps to support or resurge your resiliency as we move through the lessons that future generations will undoubtedly learn from. I'd like to thank District Attorney Todd Spitzer for his long history of tireless work advocating for victims' rights. And I would like to thank Patricia for sharing her story and for all the survivors who will take their opportunity to share part of their story with you today. I also want to thank the survivors who are silently watching for your participation as well. May your resiliency allow you to wake up each day with renewed purpose, regardless of what you are experiencing. Your strength reminds us all of our responsibility to support victims' rights, and it inspires us, and me personally, to know that we can strive and must strive to do better. Thank you.
Thank you, Lita. It's now my distinct honor and privilege to introduce one of our colleagues, Jonathan Hatami. Jonathan's a deputy district attorney with the LA District Attorney's Office. Jonathan's a military veteran who served in Operation Desert Storm prior to becoming a prosecutor. He's a child abuse prosecutor who prosecuted the torture and murder of the 8-year-old Gabriel Fernandez by Gabriel's mother and her boyfriend. Gabriel's mother was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole, and her boyfriend was sentenced to death. Following the murder convictions, Jonathan revealed that he too had suffered abuse as a child. He continues this personal fight for the most vulnerable victims of our society, our children. Jonathan, privileged to have you here today.
Good morning. I think at first I was introduced as a member of the Orange County District Attorney's Office. I love Orange County. And your DA, Todd Spitzer, he is just the best. But I am a proud Los Angeles County Deputy District Attorney. And there may be one person who wants me to leave, but I am not leaving voluntarily. I love Los Angeles. I am honored to speak about victims and survivors. I would like to thank DA Todd Spitzer for inviting me here. He truly does care about victims, survivors, and families. When a crime happens, it happens in minutes, sometimes even seconds. But the trauma that stays with the victim can last a lifetime. I am here to tell you, all of you, that you are not alone. I am a victim of child abuse. I am also a survivor. I will always stand with you. Never be bullied into silence. Every single victim, survivor, and family member is important. We all deserve justice. We all deserve to be treated fairly and equally under the law. Violence and victimization affects us all. Every victim, every survivor, every family, all of us deserve justice. However, the painful reality is dead people, dead children, they don't have a voice. But living murderers do. And I'm here to tell you that I am going to be your voice. I am going to be the victims' and survivors' voice. And maybe the best way I can do that is talk to you a little bit about Gabriel. Gabriel Daniel Fernandez was born on February 20th, 2005. He was murdered on May 22nd, 2013. That means he was 3 months past his 8th birthday when he was tortured to death by his mother and her live-in boyfriend. He was a person. He had feelings. He was a little boy. Gabriel tried to reach out to so many but in the end, he likely thought nobody cared about him. He had 11 fractured ribs. He had 9 BBs embedded in his body. He had cigarette burns all over his body. He was beaten from head to toe. He had a traumatic brain injury. His penis was cut and burned. He was force-fed cat litter and cat feces and vomit. His teeth were knocked out. He was never taken to the doctor for 8 months. They would heat a spoon and burn his feet. He was kept in a box, bound and gagged for 8 months. So when people talk about prison, Gabriel was in something much worse than a prison. That sense of helplessness, of despair, being humiliated, intimidated, abused, tortured, discriminated against for 240 days, made to feel like nothing, like nobody, made to feel ashamed of who he was. When he needed it most, nobody was there to hold him, to love him, to caress him, and just to say, Gabriel, everything will be okay. After Gabriel's death, Gabriel's teacher was looking in Gabriel's desk, and she found a note. And it said, I love you, Mom. Gabriel is a good boy. Children have no lobbyists. They cannot vote. They are the most vulnerable members of our society, and they are the most important. They are our future. Don't let Gabriel's story, his life, his death, be for nothing. Children are our most important resources. As a community, we need to do better, be better. No story should end like Gabriel's. I was lucky. I remember a time when I was 4, one of my beatings. My dad picked me up by my hair and slammed me against the wall numerous times. He hit me. I think the worst, though, was the yelling, the screaming. I think just his yelling made me cry. And I remember my parents had a bad divorce. And I remember being in the court and the judge asking, where do I want to go? Do I want to go with my mom or with my dad? And I remember the court was so big and I was so small. And it reminds me of all the children I put on the stand, both for physical abuse and sexual abuse, and how much braver they are than me, because I couldn't say anything. Shortly after that hearing, my mom kidnapped my brother and I, and we moved to Florida, and then we moved to California. And one day when I was about 12, going on 13, a picture of my brother and I were placed in the Ladies' Home Journal as missing children. And my dad found us. I want all of you, everyone, to always remember, you are never defined by what happened to you. You are defined by what you choose to become. You define yourself. So I became a child abuse prosecutor, and every day I get to fight for the rights of children, both neglected and abused. I get to fight and protect those rights of child victims. As a survivor, we must all come together as one community and support one another, support victims, support survivors, support families. But I want you all to know something. We are facing a situation today, even here in Orange County, where some DAs and some DA candidates want to place criminals ahead of victims and survivors and families and public safety. For political purposes, they're trying to divide us. They don't even want to prosecute child murderers to the fullest extent of the law. We should be proud that we have a great criminal justice system where we do protect the accused, where we do fight for the constitutional rights of the accused. However, over the past few months, we have certain politicians that are completely abandoning the rights of victims and survivors. We must have public safety. We must make sure that we don't have generation upon generation of victims. We must make sure that we honor our first responders. Police officers care. I work with them on a daily basis. My wife is a police officer. She goes out every day and she cares. They do make a difference. Crime victims groups and crime advocates care. They do make a difference. The goal of prosecutors is not to put people in prison. It's to reduce crime with safe and reasonable and effective reforms. So we have public safety for all. To some of those politicians masquerading as DAs, I have one thing to say: not in our community. We won't have a DA who re-victimizes victims. We won't have a DA who abandons survivors, abandons family members. We won't have a DA who sends mothers of murdered children to parole hearings by themselves to face the murderers of their children. We won't have a DA who enforces blanket policies on every single case for political purposes. DA Todd Spitzer knows the number one job of a DA is to make sure that children, families, and their community are safe. So I'd like to thank DA Todd Spitzer. I'd like to thank DA Steve Cooley, who hired me, by the way. I'd like to thank DA Cindy Zimmer. I'd like to thank DA Greg Totten. I'd like to thank DA Lisa Smidkamp. I'd like to thank DA Tim Ward and DA Anne Marie Schubert for doing the tough job. But the only way prosecutors can do their job is when the public gives their voice and refuses to allow survivors to suffer in silence. We need to start putting victims and survivors ahead of criminals. Every inmate made a choice. Every victim and survivor did not. And as long as I'm here, I'm going to continue to fight for all of you and for all the children who are abused and neglected. I will continue to be their voice. Together, I do believe we all can make a difference. This is my community. All of our counties are interconnected. I'm not going anywhere, and I know you're not either. This is our community. Let's take it back. Thank you.
Jonathan, thank you so much for those words. It's now my honor to introduce Steve Hare. On May 21st, 2010, Daniel Wozniak lured his 26-year-old neighbor, Sam Hare, to the Joint Forces Training Base in Los Alamitos and then shot and killed him. Wozniak, a local actor, returned the next day, mutilated the body, and distributed those parts in Long Beach's El Dorado Park. In an attempt to throw off police, Wozniak used Hare's cell phone to lure his friend, Julie Kibuishi, to Hare's apartment. Wozniak then shot and killed her as well. Steve is here with his wife of nearly 40 years, Raquel, the parents of Julie Kibuishi, who was murdered by the same killer who killed Sam, are also joining us. Steve is here to share their story. Steve, thank you for being here.
Good morning. Crime Victims' Rights Week enables us to thank all the crime victims' advocates who work so hard and diligently to fight for the rights of the victims and their families. I know for the 8.5 years, excuse me, while my wife and I were fighting for justice for our son and his friend, our advocate, Melissa Melgar, and others were there at our side, supporting us every step of the way. For that, they have our enduring love and appreciation. I also want to thank the Orange County DA's office, the Costa Mesa PD, the Orange County Sheriff's Department, and Judge Conley and his staff for treating us with the utmost compassion and respect. Raquel and I will forever be indebted. On May 21st, our son, Sam Hare, and our family became crime victims. Sam's friend and tutor, Julie Kibuishi, and her family became crime victims as well. Dan Wozniak lured my son Sam, a decorated combat veteran, to a Los Alamitos theater and placed 2 bullets into my son's head, killing him. After performing at a local play, Wozniak returned and lured Julie Kibuishi, a gifted dancer with dreams of becoming a fashion designer, to my son's apartment and shot her twice in the head, killing her. The following morning, Wozniak returned to the theater where he murdered my son and dismembered him, bit by bit, spewing my son's body parts at El Dorado Park, where animals had ravaged my son. He then returned to Sam's apartment where he murdered Julie and defiled Julie's body to make it appear that she had been raped. Wozniak wanted to make it appear that my son murdered Julie, fled, and disappeared. Why? His purpose for killing Sam was to withdraw over $50,000 that my son had accumulated and saved during his 15-month deployment in Afghanistan. Wozniak's purpose for murdering Julie? To use Julie as a decoy and divert the police's attention to Sam. So, Sam was brutally murdered thinking he was helping his neighbor. Julie was brutally murdered thinking that she was helping her friend. All so that Wozniak could pay a few bills and have an awesome, awesome honeymoon. How diabolical is that? And this is a quick note. May 29th, 2010, while it would have been my son's 27th birthday and the police were still looking for my son's body parts, that morning, that birthday morning, I was praying that the police would find my son's head. So I'm guessing you can understand my anger. After 6.5 years and over 200 hearings, not counting another 100 hearings, more hearings for the 2 other people charged with accessory after the fact, Wozniak was found guilty of first-degree murder. 12 jurors unanimously voted to sentence Wozniak to death. Yeah. Within days, that savage murderer was sent to death row. Knowing that my wife and I probably would not be around to witness Wozniak's execution, it at least gave me immeasurable comfort that Wozniak was sentenced to serve in a place that befit that heinous crime. Finally, justice was served. Finally. Or so I thought. Two and a half years later, Sam, Julie, and our families became victims again. Governor Newsom placed a moratorium on the death penalty. In one quick wave of his hand, Gavin Newsom overruled jurors, judges, the appellate courts, the California State Supreme Court, and the will of the voters of California, who voted, by the way, twice in 2012 and 2016 to keep the death penalty. As a matter of fact, the people of California voted to expedite the process. Governor Newsom's reason for the moratorium, and I quote, "I believe the death penalty is wrong, and I am exercising my right pursuant to the will of the voters of California and the California Constitution." Well, he was not pursuing the will of the people. Remember, the people voted twice to keep the death penalty, nor the California Constitution. What Governor Newsom was doing was defecating on the rights of victims and their families solely for his beliefs. Governor Newsom, feeling that the death penalty was immoral, decided to overrule the will of Californians. While campaigning for office, Gavin Newsom promised he would adhere to the law and the will of the people to follow the guidelines pertaining to the death penalty. Yet, as soon as he was sworn in, he reneged on that promise. Since the day the moratorium was announced, old wounds for me had resurfaced along with some new ones. What Governor Newsom essentially did was to tell the murderers on death row, "I've got your back." What Governor Newsom essentially told the victims and their family, "Screw you." I recently read in the OC Register that a challenger for the DA's office opposes the death penalty. The challenger's reason for opposing the death penalty is, and I quote, "Seeking the death penalty is a pointless and cruel exercise because it forces surviving victims to endure decades of appeals. They are robbed of the process as they are subjected to endless litigation with virtually zero chance that a death penalty will ever be carried out," end quote. The gall of that statement, that thought, disgusts me to my core. For him to assume that he could speak for me or all crime victims and their families illustrates his lack of understanding for the grieving families. In his guise of protecting crime victims, he has, for all intents and purposes, spat on the victims and their families. What doesn't he or Governor Newsom understand? Do they think that they are in a better position to decide the fate of brutal murderers than the jurors, the judges, the appellate courts, the California State Supreme Court, and the voters of California? How dare they? My wife and I are only one victim's family that has been devastated by violent crime. There are over 700 murderers on death row, the worst of the worst, and I repeat, the worst of the worst. For each victim's family, multiply that by 10, by 20, by 30, by 100. For those numbers truly represent the families and friends of the murdered. The grieving families and friends of the victims deserve the justice that was decreed. We, the families of fallen victims, demand that the voices of the victims should always be louder than the voices of the criminals. We, the victims and their families, demand that the rights of the victims should always be placed above the rights of the criminals. To victims and families out there today, stay strong. Thank you.
Steve, thank you for those words. It's now my honor to introduce Connie Vargo, Connie's joined today by her husband, Bob, on the stage. July 2nd, 81, Connie and Bob's 6-year-old son, Jeff, rode his bike to go look at fireworks at a neighborhood fireworks stand in Anaheim Hills. Jeffrey never came home. His body was found the next day at a Pomona construction site, and yet it took 35 years for the Vargos to learn the identity of the man who murdered their little boy, who was also a convicted sex offender and had previously murdered at least one other young boy. Worried Los Angeles was going to allow this predator to one day walk free, the Orange County District Attorney, Todd Spitzer, filed his own murder case against Jeffrey's killer. Not wanting to be prosecuted in Los Angeles, Orange County, Jeffrey's killer pleaded guilty the next week. He will be sentenced to life without possibility of parole. Connie?
Thank you very much. And first of all, I'd like to thank Todd Spitzer and his associates for inviting me here today. I'm not normally a public speaker, but I feel that it's my duty to speak out for my son. He was a 6-year-old, happy little man who was riding his bike 4th of July weekend. We were planning on having a party at our house with all of our friends. I went out at dinner time and we called him and couldn't find him, and we called the police. We searched all night. We were beyond devastated that our little man, our little 6-year-old boy, was gone. They called us. My brother-in-law went down to the Los Angeles County Coroner's Office and identified Jeffy. That, as some of you may know, that is a stab, a hole in your heart that you will never recover from. We were so sad. We could not believe that somebody would murder him and leave him in a construction site in the city of Pomona, which was about 25 miles away from our home. Jeffy was a sweet little man. He liked to ride his bike. We still have his Star Wars figures and his Matchbox cars. This was 1981, so it was 40 years ago this year that he has been gone. It took 35 years to find his murderer. He was finally found through DNA evidence, and he was a convicted child molester, and he also murdered another 6-year-old boy. So now this was a double murder trial. We couldn't understand why Jeffy was dead. It was disbelief, and I have to say, in 1981, we didn't have a lot of victims advocates. That really wasn't a part of our district attorneys or things. I mean, things have changed, and it's wonderful to see all of you here that are victims advocates, that are trying to help people that have had tragedies in their lives. Without the help of friends and family, we could have never gotten through that. I tell you, so many people came to us and said, what can we do for you? We love you guys. You know, now that it's 40 years later, all I have left of Jeffrey, my husband and I, my husband of 55 years, is pictures. Our memories are fading. You know, I don't remember what his voice sounded like. Every once in a while, I'll think of a little something that he said. You know, he was only 6. He never had a chance to grow up, drive a car, fall in love, get married, have children that would have been our grandchildren. That was all taken away from us in a single day by a monster that was evil. After many trial delays, a trial was actually supposed to be set up in June, this coming June. This was a double murder trial, as I mentioned. But our newly elected district attorney, George Gascon, removed special circumstances. he was actually up for the death penalty. He said, no, we're not going to do the death penalty. And not only that, we're removing life without possibility of parole. That means that this man, who's now been in prison, or excuse me, in the Los Angeles County Jail, and the reason it's Los Angeles County is because although we lived in Orange County, he was found in Los Angeles County, so the Los Angeles District Attorney is what was taking care of this case. When Gavin, that's another thing. When Gavin Newsom said, we're not going to, like you said, not prosecute anybody, we're not going to do the death penalty. Don't we vote on these things? He's supposed to follow the law. He's the governor. He even said, like you said, he's supposed to follow the law. But no, he's taking the death penalty off the table. So now, this double murder trial of 2 little 6-year-old boys, the other boy, I might add, fortunately, this didn't happen to my son. He was stabbed 11 times, strangled by his own pants by this, and raped. A 6-year-old, a defenseless little guy. Without even the possibility of parole, this means that this guy, Kenneth Rasmussen, I even hate to say his name, he would also get credit for time that he'd already spent in jail, which means that he would get 20 to life. He's already spent he's already spent 5 years in jail. That means that he could get out in less than 20 years. And that's not, he's also raped and molested other children. Perhaps he didn't murder them, but he scarred them for life. And there's no doubt in my mind that if he got out again, he would do it again. Some people are not able to be recouped. Okay. When the Orange County District Attorney Todd Spitzer heard about this case, he was outraged, and he actually called me at home and told me, hello, I'm Todd Spitzer, the elected District Attorney of Orange County. I said, well, of course I know who you are. And we talked, and he was willing to move this case over to Orange County so we could pursue the death penalty, or at least life without the ability of parole. Thank you, Todd, for that. We were so moved by that, and we went to the trial there in Pomona, which I understand now wanted to move again another 30 days. How many times have we heard that? But Todd and his associates all came in, and they challenged Gascon's assistant district attorney. And I have to say, and I've told so many of my friends this, Mr. Spitzer came in, he asked that guy, I forget his name, it was George something, yes. And he said, don't you have anything to say to me? He goes, no. Don't you even out of courtesy have anything to say to me? He goes, no, I don't have anything to say. I couldn't believe it. Very unprofessional. So anyway, he made a motion to move it to Orange County. And at that point, this monster, who has been in jail for the last 5 years, pleaded guilty. He pleaded guilty to a double murder. He pleaded guilty, and he is now going to the sentencing is April the 27th, so it's right around the corner next week. And he will be sentenced to life without possibility of parole and stay in jail for the rest of his life. And I have to say, without Todd Spitzer moving in, because we don't know anything about law, if they come to us and say, well, this is what's happening, and he's not going to, how am I going to challenge that? So thank you from the bottom of our heart. I know that thank you from the our Taro family as well. They're still in the Los Angeles court system, but he pleaded guilty to both of them. I want you to know that I'm not here to talk about politics. I'm here to talk about victims' rights and victim survivors and how it doesn't just mean the families, the mom and dad and big brother who Jeffy loved so much. It was our neighbors, our friends. The people in our neighborhood were scared. They thought that he was coming back and getting their children. It was just a horrible, horrible time in our lives. And thank God we're still here. And now I feel that justice is going to be served. And after the 27th and listening to them saying guilty and you're going to jail for the rest of your life, then that will be a huge burden lifted from me and my husband, my family. Now my grandchildren are older than me now. Anyway, thank you so much, Todd Spitzer. Thank you for everyone for being here. I know it's a sad day, but it's also a happy day. My little guy is the little boy in the blue vest right over there in that picture, so you know who he is. And we will never forget him, and thank you all for coming.
Now I'd like to invite our district attorney for a few closing remarks. That'll be followed by the release of doves and the Sheriff's Association pipes and drums with Amazing Grace. District Attorney Spitzer.
Thank you, Sean, and thank you for emceeing. And let me tell you the rest of the story that Connie didn't tell you. So we went up to get justice for the Vargos and their family and the other family of the little boy that was murdered in Agoura Hills, the other 6-year-old. And we clawed back that case. I want to thank Pat Dixon. I want to thank Brahim Beytai. I want to thank the appellate unit. We have the best prosecutors in the entire nation here in Orange County, okay? We got the best team, and we stood up tall, and we stood up fast, and we did the right thing. And now, as you heard Mrs. Vargo say, they finally got some peace. So I went up to this acting chief of staff, who was the shill, to come in and make an appearance because, of course, the prosecutors that had been assigned the case for this entire time, they couldn't be given the ability to see the case through. They had to bring in somebody else, right? Somebody else from the new administration. So when I went up and I said, hey, are you gonna tell me what you plan to do? He basically did, as Connie said, brushed me aside. For those of you who know me, I don't like to be brushed aside. And I said, well, I find that very discourteous. I am the elected DA from Orange County. The abduction happened in Orange County. What are you all gonna do? And he said, you know, Mr. Spitzer, you're raising your voice and you're making me very uncomfortable. I said, Mr. Enriquez, I haven't even begun to raise my voice. And that's what this entire event today is all about. Raising our voices for victims. Alison Salliter was the right front passenger of a car. She was about to graduate from high school, Cypress High School. She's a twin. The driver of the vehicle was waiting to make a left turn on a red across the street from Cypress High School. Renee Castorena worked at a claim jumper in Laguna Hills. He drove up the 5 freeway. He somehow got off at Valley View, and he proceeded to go up Valley View at 100 miles an hour. He was seen by an on-duty police officer from Cypress, and he was followed, and that officer went in pursuit, but he couldn't catch up to Castorena. When Castorena got to the intersection of Valley View and Ball, he hit and rear-ended the car where Allison was the right front passenger. The car was pushed into the intersection. It flipped around in the air. Thank God the front driver, the driver of the vehicle, she was on the inside of the whip, but Alison was on the outside of the whip of the centrifugal force. And she spent the next 3 days laying in a hospital bed because her brain, through contra coup, had gone back and forth so many times after that collision. I prosecuted that case 26 years ago. But I can tell you the facts of that case as if it happened yesterday. John Atami can tell you the facts of the case of the cases he's prosecuted. So can Steve Cooley. So can Pat Dixon. So can Brahim Beitai. We can tell you the facts of the cases we have prosecuted by heart because they are in our hearts. These cases, these victims, these children, these adults, these sisters, these brothers, these husbands, these wives are ingrained in our hearts. They are etched there in our souls. So when I opened the Daily Journal on Friday, the good work of the Orange County Fire Authority, when I opened the Daily Journal on Friday, which is the lawyers' newspaper, and the judges and everybody in the legal community, inside page 3, I had to read all the cases in the district attorney's office in LA where the death penalty is being dropped in multi-homicide cases. But as you read in this article, the district attorney of Los Angeles County participated in a conference call with the criminal attorneys when he's never met with his own attorneys, to explain to them how to get better deals on the cases that have been disposed or pending in that system. And the thing that makes me sick to my stomach is they are, quote, sifting through possibly more than 20,000 criminal cases that could be eligible for reduced sentences. What did Mrs. Vargo say? I needed closure, I needed finality. What did Steve Hare say? I got finality, I got some sense that this was going to be over in our lives. And so there are prosecutors in our country today that want to reopen these cases, not based on new evidence, not based upon something that might point to innocence like DNA or some new facts, just the existing facts of that case. And it's wrong. Lastly, talk to the prosecutor. But if you don't like what they are doing, then you can report them to the administration. Would you want to work in an environment as a prosecutor where you would be reported to your boss? John Atami said, I'm not going anywhere. Every one of us in the Orange County District Attorney's Office, we're not going anywhere. We're part of a national conversation. We're fighting for victims. We're fighting on a national stage. I want to be on a national stage. This conversation needs to start and focus on Orange County. Why? Because this county has been doing it right for decades, like it did when Steve Cooley was district attorney and Jackie Lacey was district attorney. We're going to teach this nation a lesson about how to protect victims, how to fight for victims, how to stand up for victims, how to honor victims, how to honor the memory of their loved ones, how to get them restitution and try to make them whole and get them some closure and allow them to move on with their lives to the best of their ability. We are always going to fight. That's what you heard today. We're never going to give up. We're not going to give up. We won't. We won't do it. We won't do it. I told you, it's in our DNA. We're not going to quit and we're not going to stop fighting. And the reason is very, very simple. Because Alison Salliter's parents talked to me. And when her sister got married, they had to look in their other daughter's eyes and remember their daughter they lost. When they have birthdays, they have to think about her. When their grandchildren were born, they think about her. There isn't a day that doesn't go by they don't think about their daughter, Alison. Don't ever think for a second that after we prosecute somebody, after the convictions are challenged, after they're held on appeal, that it doesn't go on and on and on against the victim. And when you sit in a parole hearing like I've done many, many times to protect the victim and to advocate for them, and to think they would be abandoned in a system where it's unfair against a 2-judge panel trying to explain the facts of the case, that's not gonna happen in Orange County, and it's not gonna happen over literally my dead body in the United States of America. It ain't gonna happen. We need you. We need you to join us. I know you do, so God bless you. And as we release the doves, we're gonna ask the victims to come up and stand here, and Sean will invite them up. I want you to look at these people. I want you to talk to them. I want you to thank them for their strength, their resiliency, and what they do to make all of our communities a better place to live. God bless you. I do love you. I appreciate everything you've done for this community, and we will always, always, always continue to represent you with respect and dignity and ethically. Thank you so much. God bless all of you.
Thank you. Dr. Williamson, will you join us on the stage before we release the doves? Dr. Williamson, who's the pastor at Christ Our Redeemer Church, will give us the benediction.
Oh God, grant us a vision for our communities. Here in Orange County, the place we live, may we continue to be safe from crime, violence, and atrocity afflicting upon the people. Please help us to respect others in our various communities, cities, and schools, religious institutions, and places of employment. We need healing in our country, in our county. We need healing in our communities. Every victim and family who lost family members and friends need healing from the violence inflicted upon them. Help us to heal and truly become our brother and sister keepers, where we can live and none shall prey on others. To all the living survivors, to each of you, all ye who are heavy laden, the scriptures tells us, come unto me and I will give you rest. May the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace in believing that by the power of God, our Creator, God will keep each and every one of you from hurt, harm, and danger, and will give you the strength, the power, and the determination to be all you were created to be, both now and forever. Amen.
Now will the victims come forward? Anyone that wants to join us up front? This concludes our program. Thank you.